from sea level rise, extreme weather events, flooding, wildfires, or other natural disasters. You know, and I'll say this up front, that language sounds very similar to some language we already have in the current regulation. Maybe we don't say the word resiliency in the actual 23 CFR 515, but it is in the preamble. And I'll say this, what should be the expectation for the next camps? I know that's a question I've received numerous times, is we know what the law says. I would recommend that states, as they do the risk analysis, as they also are looking at life cycle planning, are considering resiliency. You could argue also in the performance gap analysis. I'd also recommend that as you look at this, it's already, you know, not only in the existing regulation, but if I look at the camps that were done, an area where the risk resiliency, I think, can be stronger in camps, and I recommend states consider as they develop the next camp is, and I'm going to quote here, 23 CFR 515.9G. It addresses how the risk analysis of the crew resilience affect or are considered when the investment strategies are developed. And I think, you know, looking back at the previous camps, there was the area where you didn't see investments really directed at risk analysis in most camps, but to have some discussion on that. And I'll also add, if you look at the issue of resilience, when you're doing the performance gap analysis or performance of the network, are there sections of roadway that are subject to damages from sea level rise, extreme weather events, flooding, wildfires, or other natural disasters that affecting how your system is performing? And I recommend that be considered as you develop the TAMP. Also, Section 11105 of bill talks about protective features in the eligibility for addressing those risks I just mentioned. Could be like raising bridges, other protective devices, etc. I know I've had other questions that come up that talk about the new funding that's coming in, and that state DOTs develop their TAMP. Do they need to capture these new, what they're going to be getting? And I would quote 23 CFR 515.7G. State DOTs are to use the best data available. I'm not sure just what data your state DOT has today. I imagine in the coming weeks into January, the data will be much better. I would recommend that you meet with your chief financial officer or their office and use the best data available as you are developing the TAMP. At this point, we can't say, you know, anything more than that. And, you know, going back to the whole issue of, okay, there's more money coming in, you're going to talk about resiliency. How does this play in as state DOTs are setting their TPM targets? And as a number of you have heard from me over the past month, state DOTs should be addressing the new targets as they're developing the TAMP. You know, I can see the two working hand in hand. You're looking at the analysis, looking at the targets, etc. And I'd emphasize this point. As your state DOT is setting the target, you're looking at the long-term goal 10 years further out. And what is your target for getting there? So as you're looking at, as you're setting your target, is looking at that long-term goal, and all this is taking place too at the same time. I don't know if you're going to have any questions, or a bit later, I'd be happy to answer them to the best I can. I'm looking forward to the rest of the presentations today, and I'm going to pass it back to you, Yana. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Now, just another reminder to please put in your questions for our speakers or questions for the panel when we have the dialogue. Next, we hear from Matt Hardy with the AASHTO perspective. Matt.
All right, thanks, Yana. I'm trying to move stuff over. Here we go. All right. So just to give a little perspective, I just have sort of 3 documents to share. There was one question about the specific references, the sections of the bill that Steve was referencing, and I will show you that in the next document that I bring up. But just a sort of a quick overview from AASHTO's perspective in terms of what we're focused on when it comes to implementation of the IIJA. So we have been working at the individual committee level, reading through the bill, analyzing it from the different committee domain perspectives, issues, challenges, concerns, questions that we have about that. What I'll show next is our first draft of the high priority areas, what we call the most urgent implementation priorities. So we have a document that sort of showcases that, and we'll be talking about that during, we have a thing called, for those that are not part of the state DOTs, we have something called the Transportation Policy Forum that tries to sort of organize all of AASHTO's policy efforts. They have a monthly meeting, and they meet next this Thursday or tomorrow. So US DOT leadership will be on that call. We'll sort of hear from them. And we'll sort of talk basically more, again, high level. We can't get into specific details or specific issues, I don't think, during the meeting tomorrow, but our comments do get fairly detailed in general. And then basically in February and March of next year is when we're hoping to have more detailed comments about the IIJA, again, issues, challenges, concerns, and questions that we have. And we are doing this, we're aiming for a more formal transmittal of our concerns and everything over to the Biden administration. FHWA issued there was a notice on the public register about soliciting comments about the IIJA from the federal highways perspective. So we'll be submitting comments to the docket for that one. But just in general, you know, regarding IIJA, because it's not just about FHWA, it's about transportation in general and sort of other non-transportation aspects, including broadband, that sort of thing. So what I'm going to talk about today is this is very fluid, and we are continuously sort of updating this. So what I talk about, it's not like this is written in stone or anything. As you go through this and you say, hey, Matt, did you mean to say this or that, or you missed a section or something like that, please let me know so that I can sort of update our tables. And I have a Excel spreadsheet that I'm keeping kind of detailed information on. So what I've prepared and what I send out to the committee, and again, I know that we have, you know, non-AASHTO people on this. What I'm presenting is not, you know, I'm not trying to hide anything. It's not exclusive to the state DOTs. Sharing is caring is kind of my mantra. So this is open for anybody to kind of view. Happy to share it in general with people. So I've been looking at this from a few different lenses, one being performance management, another one being planning. There's a lot of overlap between performance management and planning. And what I've set up is a table. This is a Word file, but I actually have it in an Excel file where I keep detailed information. So there was a question about, do you have, you know, can you reference section numbers, pages, titles, subsections, and everything? And the answer is yes. So all throughout this, there are about 5 pages here. I don't have time to go through all of these. I want to kind of highlight just a few of them so that people know, like, what are we like really focusing in on. So the way I've structured this, and again, happy to share this document with others, the section number, the title, the page, and the subsection. This is important here because the actual section number, like the National Highway Performance Program, there's a lot to it. There are a number of different sections to it, and it covers, you know, a lot of different areas, one being specifically performance management. What are some highlights that I just want to point out? The first one has to do with, as Steve mentioned, some of the new asset management plan requirements, and that they are sort of going through right now, trying to, you know, have are estimating that an update to the regulation will be coming out in terms of how states prepare asset management plans, probably sometime early next year, hopefully. But there are new changes to it, and that's really sort of documented in section 11.105, which is on page 29, subsection 3. All throughout the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the bill, 2 L's, or actually the law, is references to risk and resilience. And this is one area where it's pretty new in terms of, from the federal perspective. There's a huge push when it comes to understanding risk and resilience. And that's one of the areas that we're trying to focus on for AASHTO, is make sure that there's a consistent definition of what we mean by risk, resilience, disasters, emergency events, that sort of thing. And it's kind of referred to differently throughout the bill. I think that's going to be one of our comments back to USDOT, is make sure you take a sort of a consistent definition of what you mean by a disaster, a natural disaster, an emergency event, so that it includes not just things that are perhaps weather related or affected by weather, but technology and cyber attacks as well. And I say this, that as the transportation system becomes more reliant upon technology to make it work safely and efficiently, that is going to become a bigger and bigger risk over time that states are going to have to focus on. So risk and resilience, I would say, is a huge impact. The other aspect is other important things to kind of know about. There are new funding programs, so formula as well as grant opportunities. So we have a carbon reduction program. There's a congestion relief program that has sort of formula funding associated with it. Some have it just like a grant. So the congestion relief program is a grant program. The question that comes to my mind from that performance management perspective is, how do all of these new projects and grant programs, how do we connect them back, if we do, to the performance management requirements, to those national performance measures that all the states have to establish, the PM 1, 2, 3, that sort of thing. Section 11.405 is about the PROTECT. This is the new resilience program. It's a funding, it's a formula funding aspect to it, and a grant opportunity as well. So sort of two aspects to that. There were some incentives in there that encourage states to develop a resilience implementation plan, and then to implement that resilience plan within the planning requirements, so you can kind of reduce the non-federal share to 10%. So some incentives there. We're trying to sort of work through that and how that might work. So there's a lot of emphasis on PROTECT. From the bridge perspective, performance management, just a highlight is that structurally deficient has been removed. That term has been removed from the law, and it's now referred to as bridges in poor condition, which is consistent with what came out of MAP 21 and the FAST Act when it came to bridge performance measures, bridges being in good, fair, or poor condition. There's an extension, another one that I just want to mention here, just because Steve's on the line as well, is the Performance Management Data Support Program. This is the program I believe that FHWA uses to buy the National Performance Management Research Data Set, the NPM-RDS, which is a great, wonderful data set, but what it didn't do is provide access to the CAT lab, to those PM3 sort of web-based tools. We're going to make a big push, sort of a strong recommendation, that using this program, that it would make sense for USDOT to buy access to the PM3 tools made available through the CAT lab or some other, that allows, it makes it easier for states and NPOs to calculate and provide those PM3 measures, those targets and everything. Right now we do that through a pooled fund program. We have a TPM TSP program, but it might just make more sense to just have USDOT buy access to that for everybody if they want to use it, and just reduce the burden from a financial perspective. And then the last one that I'll mention before showing my third document is the Highway Safety Program. This is one where we don't know what the implications are, but just want to point it out that within the NHTSA highway safety portion of the law, it changes the way state DOTs can establish the safety for performance measures associated with the highway safety plans, not the HSIPs, the Highway Safety Improvement Program, where targets have to be either constant or improving. You can't show declining performance. The reason why that's a concern is that those are connected through regulation and other aspects to the national level safety performance measures. And we're trying to better understand what the implications of that are and whether or not states will be able to continue to set sort of data-driven targets when it comes to the safety performance measures. And we're still looking into that, but again, you can sort of see what sections and subsections that's referred to as. So this is what I've done, going through the law, the law pretty much in detail and trying to understand what those performance management impacts might be. And then the third document, and this one is hot off the press, I guess, is our overall implementation plan for IIJA. This is what we're going to be sending over eventually to USDOT, and I'll be sending this out to the committee members. I got it this morning, and I'll be sending it out once I'm done talking here to all the members so that you have a copy of it. But this goes through just some of our general comments and questions. You can think about this in sort of 4 different areas. One is just in general with the IIJA, what are our comments and questions? So overall, the availability of funding, because of the extension of MAP 21 from an appropriations perspective, how is that affecting formula programs, new formula programs, and when will that money kind of get out and start flowing to the states? So just general questions about the availability of funding, and other overall questions, the bridge formula program, EVs. So they're just overarching when it comes to the IIJA. That's the first section. The second section gets into all of the new discretionary grant programs. There are 40 of them throughout the IIJA, from what we can tell, not just FHWA related, but in general. So we have put together, when it comes to discretionary grant programs, how should USDOT, put in place these new programs, just trying to document what are some of the issues and what are our recommendations in terms of applications. We heard from some state DOTs that oftentimes they could spend upwards of $100,000 just putting together applications for some of the old grant programs. Does it make sense to spend that much money? Can you make a simpler process so it doesn't create a barrier to other states that might not have those resources to get access to those grant programs? I think William Johnson's going to talk more about that. How do you evaluate programs, and then how do you make those awards and actually implement them? So that's the second section, is just talking about the new grant programs and how many grant programs there are. The third section are basically section by section comments, like throughout, and these are our high priority questions and everything. So that's the bulk of this document. And then the third one is just a listing at the very end, is a listing of just all of the new discretionary grant programs. Again, there are 40 of them, and we just try to go through, identify them, what section they're part of, how much money there is in them, and then who can, apply for them, what it's for, sort of a summary, that sort of thing. So I'm going to end it at that. That's kind of where we are in terms of our schedule, how we're sort of analyzing it, trying to highlight some of those issue areas, and then finally what we're sending over to USDOT from a formal process, and then also the informal process, I like to call it, where we just have these discussions, we're talking about it, FHWA is on the line listening, that sort of thing. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Perry.
To Yana. Okay, thanks, Matt.
Oh, sorry, Yana.
Yeah, it's okay. We'll now hear from Tim Henkle of Minnesota DOT. Tim is the MnDOT Assistant Commissioner for Modal Planning and Program Management Division. His over 38-year transportation career includes working with local government, the private sector, and numerous MnDOT responsibilities, including executive leadership of multimodal planning, program management, and project development and delivery. Tim is the chair of the TRB Asset Management Committee, the AASHTO Committee on Performance-Based Management, the National Transportation Asset Management Expert Task Group, and the TRB Research and Technology Coordinating Committee. Okay, now I'll turn it over to Tim.
Thanks, Yana, and thanks, Matt and Steve, for your excellent work. I really appreciate the continuing partnership and the opportunities to learn today, as well as to learn from the yeoman's job that Matt is doing with the compilation of issues and opportunities. Might I ask for forgiveness in kicking off my remarks and I hope I'm not abusing the privilege of being a panelist here, but I'd like to acknowledge that right now the heart of our country is experiencing a devastating set of losses associated with tornadoes. And I just want to take advantage of this opportunity to say to all that are potentially on this call today impacted by that devastation that our thoughts here collectively are with you, and our prayers are with you as you go through that extremely difficult time. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to give a few perspectives here on what's happening at a state level. And I'd like to start off by saying we, like is probably the case with all the participants that are joining today, we're really scratching our heads, scratching the surface, so to speak, with respect to the status and our progress. And we're just really all working collectively as we are here to understand and implement the IIJA or bill, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. Yet I would say first and foremost that we are truly grateful to those that made that bipartisan act a reality. And like everyone participating, we're working to quickly understand and implement the bill. We see the IIJA as being transformative. It's really transforming the federal state transportation partnership to include those new aspects of the definition of transportation that include things like carbon reduction, the climate resiliency, the restorative justice, broadband, electric vehicle infrastructure, really into the surface transportation reauthorization framework. And we know that this is a longer term bill, finally, which is really going to help us with planning for long-term projects. Next slide, please. We are continuing to review the IIJA really in anticipation of additional guidance from US DOT, hopefully coming in the short term in the coming months. Like many of you, that significant influx of funding that we hope to see occur soon, hopefully as early and no later than February of next year, will require that at the state level, we have the state legislature appropriate funds for matching funds. So we have a lot of work to do here in understanding the realities of new funding coming at us, but also preparing in the short term to be able to spend, assuming we're going to have that authority to do so very, very shortly. And moreover, and you'll hear more about this in a minute from me, we work in partnership with those that receive federal funds through MnDOT and directly at the local level. So we're planning to engage stakeholders at both the state and local level on things like funding split. Next slide, please. So our most immediate task in helping those that are participating today to really understand what's going on here is moving from the FAST Act to the new Act and really understanding the flow of funding to the state. And this chart just is intended to provide an example of what we're doing to understand and estimate formula funding coming to Minnesota. This chart is really rough. It's a guess at this point in time, and it doesn't include discretionary funds like the grants and the national solicitation programs that will also be a part of the bill. Over the next 5 years, as an example, we're estimating somewhere around $4.8 billion in funding, and we're breaking that down into various categories so that we can look at the 4-year STIP and what we call our 10-year capital highway improvement program and begin to lay out what the impacts of this might be. And just by example, when we compare the past act to the current act, we're looking at current projects in the level of about 3.6 billion, a difference between 3.6 and 4.8 billion. Next slide, please. It's too early for us, and so you're not surprised to hear that we have not determined any specific projects that can or will advance with funding from the bill. We will be using our planning process and project selection processes to help us to understand what those priorities are. This graphic depicts and represents the fact that we continue to use our planning process, our long-range plans, our interim plans, interim year plans, as well as the STIPs and TIPs as the basis for moving forward and identifying where we might have gaps in our existing program, as well as identifying future opportunities. We're anticipating extensive public engagement and conversations with local elected officials, with our state lawmakers, stakeholders, other community-based organizations, and I'll give you an example of a few of those in a minute. Yesterday, we held a first hearing at the House level in the state, gave us an opportunity to testify to what we understand about the bill, IIJA, and had an opportunity to brief legislators. As you'd expect, they have questions about what's coming at them and what they need to do for the state to be able to spend these important additional dollars. Next slide, please. So in summary, in terms of the fiscal realities and the work that we're doing, this is just an example of what we're doing to represent and help our stakeholders understand the world that we're living in. This is a quick summary of what we're looking at in terms of federal funds per year, what we're looking at in terms of potential state and local match, and what helps legislators as well as MnDOT and local leaders understand what's coming at us in totality, as well as what we need to do to ensure that we have matching funds for that significant influx of additional money. Next slide, please. I've noted that we are working and will have a significant engagement with our partners. And as a part of our work, we have a process for engaging. This graphic, I hope, helps others to understand how we're doing business, but maybe influences how you're thinking about working with your partners. We've laid out a process for engaging our partners and asking our partners to help us to make recommendations regarding changes to the Minnesota programming process that might be necessary, defining various roles and responsibilities that may need to change or be modified as we move forward with the new bill, what changes or updates should be considered to the distribution of those federal and state capital funding funds, and what might change in terms of our target formulas across the state, as well as ensuring that this is really clear, transparent, and consistent communication of the programming process and the guidance across the state. Next slide, please. Just a few other points. We're trying to ensure that our local partners have a seat at the table, and we're also engaging many staff within the departments, the experts that help us to expend those federal dollars and develop and follow the rules to make sure that we're doing the right stuff. Next slide, please. And it looks like this. The graphic depicts the way we do business to make investment decisions within the department with the wealth of knowledge and wisdom from our local government partners and what we call a programming update work group that brings together those partners, as well as various subgroups that help to inform and make recommendations eventually to the commissioner so that we can move forward with this bill in the coming months. Next slide, please. By example, we have a transportation alliance in this state, an event in addition to the hearing that we had yesterday with the legislature. This is an alliance event that is being a partnership opportunity for MnDOT to join our industry, transportation industry, in understanding the bill, as well as influencing how the department and our partners move forward to make recommendations regarding the future distribution of money. Next slide, please. As you formulate some of the questions that you might have and enter those into the chat box, here's some of the things that we're really thinking about. And they may not necessarily be questions, but these are needs from a state perspective that we've gathered so far. The need for flexibility in using these funds, having reasonable timelines as we move forward to implement the requirements of the law and the various categories, in particular of discretionary funding, clarity in the allowable uses of these funds, advancing notices of changes, meaning in advance, if at all possible, so that we have ample time to be able to implement the guidance, encouraging ongoing coordination between our federal partners and states that need to implement, as well as broad interpretation of project eligibility for new programs. Next slide. And finally, just from our state perspective, this is how we look at the future with the signing of the law back in November. Now through the spring, the input phase of this work, January, making sure as we move into our legislative session that we're ready with the matching funds through our governor's budget proposals. January, our session begins, and hopefully by that time we're seeing actual appropriations of funds, and then February being that timeline for when we're hopeful that we would have authority to begin spending funds. Next slide, please. That ends my perspectives. I hope that gives you some perspectives on what's happening in this state and some of the realities that we face. I'll pass it back to the coordinator to introduce the next presenter. Thanks.
Thank you, Tim. Next, we're lucky to have Matt Halbrook of Iowa DOT. Matt is the Transportation Asset Management Administrator at the Iowa DOT. He currently serves as the chair of the AASHTO Subcommittee on Asset Management and is a member of the TRB Asset Management Committee. He's been involved in numerous national conference planning committees and NCHRP panels. Matt's career experience is primarily in the field of data analytics. He's been with the Iowa DOT since 2010. Now, Matt will share his perspectives.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thanks for everyone for being here on this webinar today. It's great to see so many folks participating. I just have a few comments. I didn't have an opportunity to put together slides like Tim did, but I'll share a few thoughts that we are seeing here from the Iowa perspective. So one thing to know about Iowa is that our capital program is a 5-year capital program that kind of encompasses more than just the large capital projects. It actually incorporates most of our kind of maintenance and preservation types of activities as well. And we have a transportation commission, a citizen commission, that then approves that program on an annual cycle. So every year we're kind of adding that 5th year of the program. As we get new funding, then we will oftentimes do what we call an amendment, where we'll take that program that's been approved in the last cycle, which is in June, and we'll say, okay, well, so we're receiving maybe some new funding here. We need to start thinking about putting those funds to work and trying to identify projects that we can use those dollars to invest in the system. So as we're looking at our program, it's on the order of about $800 million a year, depending on kind of how you count it. That's state plus federal, and that's just the formula funding type programs. So we're expecting to see from just the formula side somewhere in the neighborhood of about 70 to 100 million additional dollars. So so fairly substantial bump. One issue that we face, and Tim kind of alluded to this in his comments, is the question of kind of leverage. We have traditionally had a fairly robust state level funding that's led us to have quite a bit of flexibility in how we determine which projects we're going to apply federal aid to, and sort of how we do that. As we get more federal dollars, that kind of puts us in the position of having those dollars a little bit more heavily leveraged, and gives us less flexibility in sort of how we determine which projects we're gonna use federal aid on. We've also, that's been exacerbated a little bit because we've also a few years back had some legislation that allowed us to do a swap program with our local agencies, and they've been quite interested in taking advantage of that to simplify their project delivery, which some of our smaller local agencies have, sometimes can get caught out on some of the federal requirements if they're not used to doing that kind of thing, and it just, we're a little bit better equipped at the DOT in most cases, or in many cases, to kind of manage those projects to comply with the federal requirements. However, as we do that swap program, that then raises our leverage essentially, and probably is going to, in fact, we're already starting to talk with the local agencies to let them know that we may not be able to do a full swap in the coming time frame. That sort of remains to be seen, but at least trying, as Tim indicated, we need to talk to those stakeholders and make sure that everyone understands some of the implications that might come out of some of this new funding, which is always a good thing, but there are details to be worked out, and a lot of that is things that we are starting to work on. We're certainly going to be having even closer management. I think we've had a very successful program management process in the past, but we're going to be putting those folks to work even more in the future, as we have to manage the program a little more carefully to make sure that we're using all the money in the most efficient way. We did start already the process of trying to identify some projects. In fact, just yesterday we had our monthly meeting with the Transportation Commission, and during the workshop time where we kind of talked to them about some of the upcoming issues that they don't necessarily need to take action on, but we can kind of have more of a dialogue with them. We did present to them a series of new stewardship projects that we are thinking we'll be trying to propose in an amendment in this current fiscal year. So we're looking for projects that are very quick turnaround. I'm very excited about the fact that we had some hard work done by our pavement management group to identify some opportunities for some non-interstate pavement replacements, which is something that we've often struggled in the past because just they're very costly. But we have a lot of pavements that were originally built 100 years ago that, or 80 years ago, that have been overlaid 5 or 6 times, some 7 times in some cases, and are really just getting to that point where replacement is about the only viable option. So we've put forward a number of candidates there, and really excited to see that some of that more high dollar stewardship type funding, I'm going to call it stewardship because we're really replacing in kind, not adding capacity or anything like that. So that, I think, is a real positive development, and I'm pleased to see our leadership and our commission being very supportive of that. It's not that long ago that I think any new influx of funding probably would have gone mostly to kind of adding capacity to our system. But I think we've kind of really been successful in our conversations about asset management and why stewardship is so important, and have kind of things started to move the needle a little bit in terms of getting some other thought processes going on how we should be investing in the new funds in the network. So that's very exciting. I would say that we're still very much in the stage of trying to digest all of the grant programs. As Matt alluded to, there's a large number of them. Not all of those will apply to the DOTs, but as we think about our multimodal system and how some of those grant programs might affect us, I think that there's some very interesting and provocative questions there. We'll need to be kind of working through and trying to identify how we can put those incorporate the possibility of those grant fund programs into or discretionary programs into our sort of planning process, and thinking about how that's going to impact our investment on the stewardship side, as we might have a little less certainty about sort of how some of these projects that have been identified as needs, how they're going to be funded exactly. So that'll be an interesting development. I'm sure many states and other agencies are also having similar thoughts. I think another, picking up on what Steve was talking about earlier related to resilience, this is a thing, and many states are working hard on resilience, or have been working hard on resilience already, but I'm really excited about the opportunities there for us to. We've had a resilience working group that was chartered a couple of years ago that's really been helping to raise the profile of some of the resilience needs that we have on our system. And this emphasis in the IIJA, I think, is really going to reinforce the work of that group. I think there'll be some real synergy between some of the new sections of the law and the work that group has been doing. Just very serendipitous that just a few weeks ago we had a large workshop where we pulled together a large cross-functional group of people across the whole agency, including our motor vehicle functions, our motor vehicle enforcement folks, so the weight agents. We had a large cross-section of our agency that came together to talk about what does resilience and sustainability mean for our agency and for our state, and what are some things that we can work on. And I think having some focus on that in this highway bill and gives us a real opportunity to put some of those things to work. And I think we're very excited about those opportunities as well. So I think those are just a few of the things going on in Iowa. I know we have a lot more happening than just a few things that are kind of related to highway asset management that I primarily work on. I won't try to portray those other things, but appreciate your attention on hearing about some of the things that we're working on at Iowa, and looking forward to the continued conversation. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Matt. Next up, we have Anne-Marie McDonald. Anne-Marie has been a transportation engineer for Connecticut DOT for over 34 years. As the Transportation Supervising Engineer for Connecticut DOT's Transportation Asset Management Group, she coordinates asset management activities across the agency and leads the development and implementation of the department's transportation asset management plans. Her background includes the study of pavement, weighing motion technology, transportation research, and new technologies. And from 1987 to 2015, she worked with the coordination of the long-term pavement performance experiment. Anne-Marie served on the TRB expert task groups for long-term pavement program and is serving on the TRB ETG for long-term bridge performance program. She serves as the vice chair for the AASHTO subcommittee on asset management and is a member of the AASHTO Transportation System Preservation Technical Services Program Oversight Panel. Over to you, Anne-Marie.
Thank you, Yana, for that welcoming, and also thank you for including me in today's dialogue. It really is an exciting time, and I've chosen to share with you my perspective from a TAM approach, and what we're doing in Connecticut, and things that may pertain to you. So just like many of the other presenters, and I know from my neighboring states, we are feverishly gathering information and developing questions. And this type of collaboration, and it's particularly through AASHTO and how we can synthesize those questions and hopefully get clearer guidance, is really, and coming from a research perspective in my past, that collaboration is really essential, and it's that support that we need to figure out where we're going with this. So that's a considerable effort at this particular point, and we're gathering information both at the administrative levels. I love Tim's diagram, and throughout the technical areas with input. I would say we are really looking to leverage TAM. And when I say leveraging TAM, I think we're fortunate that we've had some experience, good, bad, painful, wonderful, developing the last two TAMPs. We're in a better position and ready for this bill. And that's with data, all the methods and processes. And I'm really seeing that with the next TAMP also. So we're using what we learned and we're getting questions on the data that we have and initiatives that we've done that puts us in a better position to support decisions. We are assembling what resources we need. A lot of times when we talk resources, and I know with the TAMP and also with the bill, everyone's saying, show me the money, right? They're very focused on the financial, because without the money, you don't have the means to do it. But there are many aspects to this resource question and issue, and it's show me the data, right? And also we have very large exodus of retirements coming in the spring at the same time that we have these major initiatives that we've talked about for years. The aging infrastructure, it's fantastic, but we're ramping up both with hiring, with support services to see how we can do the project and the support that's needed to implement this plan. So that's a key focus right now, is what resources we need. And we are actually seeing, so we're putting line items on different assets. It's interesting, we have assets not necessarily in the TAMP yet also that are like retaining walls and drainage that would typically get updated when we did a corridor improvement, but we're putting line items and dedicated funding. These are assets that haven't been updated since the interstate system. And so we are finding in our planned or proposed projects behind the scenes that over 50% are TAM related. And that could be from, we have lots of different assets in the TAM, but basically asset related. So that's a considerable investment and also consideration. Along with that, we are adding additional assets, as I just mentioned, whether it's ITS for mobility, looking at, again, drainage, retaining walls that are that are linked to resiliency. And we also have a lot of initiatives behind the scenes, and that may be the case in your state, that it may not be in your TAMP, but you have different initiatives that you can support now, whether it's on life cycle, whether it's on data collection, or any of the key parts of the TAMP, that having that assembled and standardized will help you in the supporting of these decisions. So yes, resiliency is a great emphasis, and we've seen this coming for a few years. We created a new group in our planning with people focused with their main task. Again, when it's assigned to a group on resiliency, we're meeting with them as the TAM group periodically and tying them into our risk assessment. And last year when we did our risk update, you can't assume the technical people necessarily are aware of what's included in resiliency, as we are all defining that now. But in that dialogue, it was really helpful to not just ask what risks, but facilitate and guide that discussion. And often they'd had design standards improvements they may have implemented. And when you start to say, well, great, higher winds or different temperature range for your asphalts in addition to coastal or inland flooding, that conversation evolves into how you're managing your assets. At the state level, we're doing vulnerability studies, and there's some ongoing state initiatives that we hope will line up and tie together as we move forward on the resiliency front. And our agency, and there's many different emerging topics within this bill. Our agency has made a commitment towards equity. I'm really excited at TRB. They're going to have a panel on TAM and equity and seeing what we can do to support and make advancements in this area. So I also listed some key topics for discussion, which is part of the value of today. I hope we get to discuss. It's a 5-year legislation. As Tim said, that's fantastic because, you know, we've been talking and wanting this for so many years, but that's just a slice of what it takes in the life cycle of an asset and certainly in developing our TAM. So what to do with that, what to do with uncertainty, how to characterize funding uncertainty, as well as performance uncertainty, how to incorporate risks. And right now we're going through, and even though sections of the TAM, you think it's discrete, there are a lot of pieces in the legislation that, and I see it on both the public trans side and the highway side, that tie back to asset management. We're really trying to get an understanding how these other programs are referenced in the legislation. So I'll turn it back to you. And thank you, Yana.
Thank you, Anne Marie. All right, our final speaker is William Johnson from the Colorado DOT. William leads the Performance and Asset Management branch for the Colorado Department of Transportation. The Performance and Asset Management branch is responsible for CDOT's performance measures, asset management, risk and resilience, and economic analysis programs, in which they provide tools to effectively measure, analyze, forecast, and communicate to staff and stakeholders the performance of Colorado's transportation programs, processes, and investment decisions. William has been with CDOT for 22 years and previous served as the GIS Data Management Section Manager and as a mobility planner. He has an MS in Management and a BA in Land Use. William.
Hey, I'll probably have to modify that bio just a little bit. Sorry, Yana. So what I'm presenting really isn't anything specific. I don't think you've heard anything specific because there's just so many new things within Bill. And, you know, one of the first questions Matt asked is it IIJA? Is it Bill? I'm going to call it Bill just so you know what I'm discussing. And could you go to the next slide, please? I think first and foremost, everybody's talking about what's the money. And, you know, for Colorado is we've taken a very different approach towards, you know, as Matt Hardy said, there's formula-based funding, there's discretionary funding. And for the most part, your DOT should know what that formula-based funding is. Now for Colorado, and I'm going to post this up here, opportunities for asset management in terms of getting access to formula-based funding is very limited. And I say limited because we've just developed a 10-year plan of which there are over 400 projects within that plan. And when you have something that's a plan, that means you have 400 projects with need for actual dollars. So we've already made a strategic decision that for new money that we're getting, specifically those things that are coming from the formula-based allocation within Bill, we're going to put those towards the plan. And by all means, there are asset management opportunities in the plan, but for the most part, it's, you know, Colorado, it's been a growing state for the past 2 or 3 decades. We haven't really had a specific program or funding program for adding capacity. So a lot of those 400 projects within the 10-year vision are for capacity projects. And as well as we're looking at what is the next generation of travel. So definitely EV and connected vehicles, as well as all those other things that you would find with owning, maintaining, and operating a multimodal transportation system. So modality is definitely included in there. But the one thing that you're really sacrificing is asset management. Now, for Colorado, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're limiting the amount of dollars that we're putting towards asset management. We do have more traditional funding sources that are going towards the normal asset management program to the tune of between $700 and $800 million a year. But we follow very regimented asset management approaches where we take a fix it first ideology using those funds. And what that means is that we have a huge backlog of poor assets that, you know, if given the opportunity to put additional funds, additional being through stimulus, through Colorado Senate bills, through bill, it would have been my preference that we would have leveraged some of that money to put towards poor assets. And again, I'll reiterate that poor assets are included within our 10-year plan, but it always just feels like it's not enough. I could probably use every single dollar that's within bill and put it towards poor pavement and bridge in Colorado, and we'd still not address all of the poor. That said, I understand that for us, and specifically when it comes to transportation performance management, you do have to spread that peanut butter a little bit. But that leaves us in terms of asset management, asking the question, well, where can I leverage opportunities within bill? And there I'm going to point towards grants. There's a lot of money in grants, but the question really is for Colorado, as well as other DOTs, is doing a grant application is a resource intensive process. And with the billions of dollars locked into competitive grants or those discretionary grants within bill, is do we have the staff we need to compete for those grants? Do we have the level of expertise needed? And further, when I'm talking about our 10-year vision, which is a planning document, again, 400 projects within that, not all those projects are going to be funded. And so, as those discretionary grants become available, does asset management, specifically those poor asset management projects, do they compete well against what we'd be looking at for other projects that exist in our list of needs? Now, other things that we consider is, well, bridges. Thank you, Bill. You gave us more money specific towards bridges. Both in the formula-based funding as well as the discretionary grant opportunities. I'll reiterate right now, still with those dollars in Colorado, our first look is what's on the 10-year plan. And with that, I will say that, yes, there's an absolute correlation between bridges in poor condition and bridges that need capacity improvements. So in one way, we luck out. In another way, Colorado, we're a heavy rural state, and we have things like a huge number of timber bridges that those aren't the things that really are suffering from capacity, but what they do suffer from is from 100 or 120-year-old timber structures that ideally we'd like to replace, but it's again looking at what's on the 10-year it's that balancing act. And I have that resilience improvement plan in the wrong place. Sorry, I'll talk about it in the next slide. The next thing is pavements. Is if you look at the bill funding tables, there's really no dedicated funding towards pavements like there is bridges. I'll point to there is an increase in the STBG as well as NHPP. Again, the idea in Colorado is with STBG and the National Highway Performance Program funding is those are relatively flexible federal funding pots, which means that you can put it towards many things besides traditional maintenance activities. And so for us, as we really look at that as an opportunity to start getting into that 10-year list, those 400 projects, which may or may not necessarily include asset management. The point there is, when we look at pavements, there is an opportunity when it comes to competitive grants and that emerging technology research pilot program, as well as the technology and innovation deployment program, to look at how the changing nature of travel or how we travel and the connectivity of that travel impacts the performance of pavement. So with that is we'll definitely be looking at leveraging that. The next thing is, and this is one thing that I find particularly interesting, is the Healthy Streets program. Now for Colorado, and I'm going to post another thing up here into the chat. We just passed a Senate bill, we call it Senate Bill 260, and part of that Senate bill stands up a couple of different offices. We have a new enterprise on bridge and tunnels, so it expands our bridge enterprise, which exists now, to a bridge and tunnel enterprise. Colorado has the highest tunnel on the interstate system in Eisenhower-Johnson. It actually goes under the Continental Divide. It stands up our freight office. There's a lot of provisions for greenhouse gas, which is related very much to the Healthy Streets program. And then there's a new Office of Environmental Justice and Equity. And so with that, looking at the Healthy Streets program, which is funded by discretionary grants, there's opportunities for cool and porous pavement. Why is that important? Well, Colorado, like many states with big urbanized areas, and I'll point to Denver as an example, is typically with a built environment, it could be 10 to 20 degrees hotter because of the radiated heat island effect that cool and porous pavements are designed or can be a strategy to start addressing. Now, when it comes to transportation, you have to look beyond just, cool and porous pavement, good thing. You have to look at that with a lens towards what effect does transportation have, not just on the ability to move people, goods, information, but on the broader community, which really dips into the equity question. Now, for Colorado, again, as well as many other heavy urbanized areas, the people who suffer most from heat island effects are homeless. They're disadvantaged people that aren't necessarily traveling using that infrastructure. They exist and live on that infrastructure. And when you start to think about opportunities in bill, and for Colorado, leveraging those opportunities to match up against our Senate Bill 260, which has huge greenhouse gas implications within it. Again, heat island, it increases the radiated heat from greenhouse gas. Greenhouse gas traps the heat and pushes it back down on us. Then there's also the off-gassing effect that we see from combustion engines. Off-gassing means that the volatile organic compounds start to seep into your homes. It really gives us a different perspective. So when we look at Healthy Streets and the ability to do the equity assessment, that is mapping out how your natural environment affects things like your climate change threats and how it interacts with, you can look at the list there, multimodal assets. It really gives you a different lens to peek through. And so for Colorado, we'll definitely look at how Healthy Streets money can be added strategically in relationship to our 10-year plan, but also asset management specific, because asset management, the changing nature of travel, not just through connected and automated vehicles, but repurposing of existing assets to be more complete streets type approach, to be more multimodal type approach, is calling for equity lenses within the analysis to ensure we're getting the right things. Next slide, please.
Hey, William, could I just suggest that?
I could speed this the heck up.
Yeah, just in the interest of time, if we could go very quickly or skip the slide, thank you.
I'll go super quick because it's important. You can't really talk about asset management without talking about risk and resilience. I posted a link to CDOT's risk and resilience program. The big thing, if any takeaway you have here, is that resilience improvement plan. With the resilience improvement plan, it's not required, It's definitely not required for the formula-based funding, but as you look at it for the competitive grants, it reduces your state matching share by up to 10%. Now, the information that I posted on the link there doesn't in and of itself constitute a resilience improvement plan. It's more of a series of tools and manuals that can be used in part to address the resilience improvement plan. That's probably going to be the first thing that, you know, I as a leader for transportation performance management in Colorado, we're going to address that first. So the rest of the stuff you can read. And Yana, in respect of time, I'll pass it back to you.
Actually, to Matt.
I'll pass it back to Matt.
All right, thanks, William. So we're going to talk about now, I'm going to take over control. So I've had the Mentimeter slide up, or sorry, the presentation up for a while. So if, oh, there we go. Perry's going to bring it up for me. Thank you. We don't have to sort of move around. I just kind of wanted to go through, maybe you can go to the first one there, Perry. Thank you. So the first question is, which one is the little humor? Which one is it? Is it IIJA or bill? So we have 15 in favor of IIJA and 4 in favor of bill. So you can keep on adding your opinion to that, but I'm sure it'll never go away. So regardless of how we refer to it. If you go to the next slide, so there were sort of 4 questions here. One, the first 3 were a little bit more specific about challenges, opportunities, and sort of, you know, questions about the bill. And then the last slide is just any other generic questions that you might have. So this is an opportunity for y'all to kind of, you know, post your questions here, or you know, what do you see as some of the biggest challenges to IIJA? And if you want to, you know, please, you know, you can. I guess we can't do that. I was going to say unmute yourself and tap your camera on, but we're not going to do that. But we can kind of just sort of go through these. If you have any other comments or questions, you can type them in. But you know, the regulations, new federal aid direct funding recipients, we have talked about that within AASHTO. Again, that's sort of bigger, broader than just performance management. If there's anything here performance management specifically related, let me know. So there's one here, reconciling the targets with the new TAMPs. Official targets are due after the next TAMPs are due. I've heard about that. I know I've been talking with, we've been talking with Steve Gay about that and bringing it up during the some of our TAM meetings. Staffing of state DOTs, consultants, and the industry to deliver. I think that's a good comment right there. And I've heard that consistently from many of the states, is that even though we have all this, you know, new money coming in, there needs to sort of be some managed expectations about the ability of states to kind of just deliver, just, you know, so quickly and just turn on a dime or just, you know, get things going. The other comment that I kind of noted was Anne Marie when she said that, oh, this is a 5-year bill. And yes, it is from a funding perspective. It's a 5-year bill, but I kind of think of MAP 21, or it was a 2-year bill. FAST Act was a 5-year bill. From a policy perspective, I mean, the policies that we saw in MAP 21, you know, it was going to take 5, you know, 10 years to really implement and kind of see what the implications are. And I think the same thing is true for the IIJA, that many of these sort of policy changes, like the PROTECT program, the emphasis on risk and resilience, to kind of get these in place and to sort of see the benefits of them, is going to take a certain amount of time to have them go into effect. Knowledge, again, knowledgeable staff, resources and expertise needed to pursue the competitive grants. That's one that we have been hearing a lot from the states, and we try to really emphasize on our AASHTO comments about that. What else? We can scroll up. Why don't we go to the next question? But these are all great. We're going to capture all of these and you know, document them, and just, again, as we start thinking about this, the implementation. So the second question was, what do you see as the opportunities within the IIJA? Focus on equity, climate change, extreme weather, funding for resilience, absolutely. More money, yes. It would be how do you actually deliver on that? What else is there? To use the extra funding to make improvements on the local bridge system. Yep. Expanded bridge replacement dollars. I think William talked about that. You know, the focus on bridges, perhaps not so much on pavements. More emphasis on resilience. I guess an opportunity, not increasing the profile of the importance of asset management. Funding certainty, yes. All right. Can you scroll up a little bit? Maybe I should have. There we go. I think the common theme here is that the increased, resilience, increased consideration of resilience within asset planning. More funding available to address assets not in a good state of good repair. Yep. All right. So those are some of the opportunities. And if we go to the next question. So what questions do you have about the IIJA? I think that first one there, how have other states prepared for the competitive grants? I think that the whole grant process, I know I've been talking with the leadership here at AASHTO, what can AASHTO do to support the state DOTs when it comes to the grant program? Are there tools, resources that we can provide, to the states, sharing what others have done to kind of be successful and just to make it sort of more equitable, I would say. Question is what's happening with the potential GHG performance measure. I can say that the rulemaking website has been updated, and now the expectation is a GHG measure or NPRM sometime in the spring, so that has been pushed back to the spring. Other than that, I don't think anybody knows except for Steve, and he's not going to share just because he can't, and we understand that. Questions about when will we know how much money we have for specific programs. I think those are questions that we have relayed over to USDOT. A question, will Congress actually get around to funding it? Hopefully, but there is the whole appropriations track and everything. So yes, that is a proverbial question that kind of comes around every year sometimes. Resiliency planning. The timing of the rulemaking to effectuate the bill. Yes, I know that it's part of a spreadsheet, the information that I'm keeping and tracking. It's not just the updated of the rulemaking, but also guidance as well. So new or updated rulemaking, new or updated guidance, and just general information coming out in terms of how to implement the program. That last box there on the right, how does USDOT ensure the investment has actually made a difference? There are a couple of instances throughout the bill that I've been looking at that talk about doing ex post analysis. One is of the Protect Grant Program money, and the other one is under the travel demand models. I forget the section number off the top of my head, but the intent of both those programs is to kind of set up I don't know what they're going to do with it, but I would think of setting up a framework or some sort of a process for doing ex post analysis of projects. Again, the one for Protect is specific to the grant money under the Protect program, and then for the travel demand modeling analysis, it was more sort of project related. It's part of the planning process. It was a little bit broader, but I think the intent was to look at sort of ex post analysis to make sure that the projects, the way I see it is that sort of feedback loop for performance management is that we're going to go through this sort of defined process to justify and support the decision of yes, we should build this project, implement this program, whatever it is. We're going to do that, and then we want to evaluate and say, hey, were the results what we thought they were going to be, and kind of feed that information back in to the decision-making process. So I see in the bill a couple of areas of where that is going to be. And if we go to the last slide here before we have to perhaps end or sort of wrap up, so any other questions? This is an opportunity for y'all to sort of enter those questions here. And we're not trying to, try to answer them right now. We're just trying, I think, in general, trying to capture them as much as possible. For long-term financial planning, what's the appropriate way to assess the likelihood of being selected for competitive grants? I've heard that a lot from states. Is the formula funding, there's more certainty there. You can plan for it better, develop a plan that's actually relevant and applicable. With the grants, that competitive nature of it, there's significantly more uncertainty, and how do you plan for something like that? The second one, they're struggling with including IIJA funding in the 2022 TAMP, with funding still in flux and swiftness of this being rolled out, and what is realistic to deliver and implement to ultimately affect performance targets for each year over the next 2 years. Good comment. All right. Oh, so that was great input, and again, we will take that, capture it. It's kind of there. Why does the state have to compete with others? Why not band together and increase buyer power with contractors? That's an interesting perspective. I know that there have been some examples. I want to say under the frame, I can't remember which grant program it was, but a couple states, got together and submitted applications for grants. I think it had to do with something with truck parking. This was a few years ago, but I can't remember off the top of my head. All right, so those are all great comments, great input. I was going to say, if there are any more questions from the audience, you can type them in either here, or you can use the Q&A functionality. Let me just pull this up so I can see it. I don't see any new questions coming in. I will say that I have gotten emails about the tables and the Word files that I showed. I did send those out to the committee members just now. I provided a link within the chat to my Dropbox account with access to the table, that Word file with the table, so you should be able to access it there. Anything, let me just give it one more minute here for any other questions coming in. All right, and all right, I'm gonna go to my wrap-up slide here. I don't see anything else coming from anybody. So with that, it's 12:56. Dropbox is banned by most state DOTs. Yeah, I'm not sure the best way to do that, but I did email it out. Again, if you want to get a copy of that, send me an email. Please be sure to send me an email, and I will just forward you. I'll just put everybody's emails in sort of one and just forward it to you. mhardy@ashto.org. It's also in the chat. Happy to share all that stuff with you. It'll also be posted to policy.transportation.org. So just as an FYI. So with that, let me just bring up my little script here. Thanks for joining us today. Our next webinar is going to be held 2 months from now. Again, the sort of the TAM webinar series, February 16th at our regular time, 2 p.m. Eastern, on the, what is this, the third Wednesday of the month. We don't know what the topic is. We'll figure that out. But as always, if you have topics that you want us to focus on, it is great to get those from you as the audience. So please share those with us. You can send them to me. You can send them to Yana Park. You can go to the TAM portal and submit them that way. Just let us know what your topics are, because it would be great to have, what do you want to hear about? And we have people that can kind of organize those for you. We will, be organizing again to just that overall next series. I think after the holidays, just keep on be sure to send us your topics, your ideas. Go to the TAM portal. Everybody in unison, tam-portal.com. That is your one-stop shop for all things asset management. And with that, I want to wish everybody a very safe and healthy holiday. I hope to see you at TRB. I want to see you at TRB, so stay safe. If you're traveling somewhere, be sure to buckle up, obey the rules, all that good stuff. And I can't wait to see y'all in 2022. It was a great 2021. We got a lot done, a lot accomplished, given limitations and the resources. Thanks to the SpyPond team. Thanks to FHWA, Steve. Just thanks to everybody. So with that, thank you, and we'll see you later. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.